Hi everyone, welcome back to Hypeword. It's Daryl here. Today I've got a review for you. I'm going to be reviewing the Boom Studios Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot. So here is the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Volume 1 of the Boom Studios reboot. It sees Buffy and the gang go back to high school, but with a little bit of a twist. They're actually going back to high school not in the 90s, but in 2019. So as you can see, there are a few differences there, one of them being Buffy has got a mobile phone. So I mention pretty much all the time in my videos that I am a Buffy the Vampire Slayer superfan. I watched the series all the way through the 90s and until it ended, and I continued on with the graphic novels after that. I also investigated a little bit with the high school years comic book that Dark Horse released, which is here. Actually sees Buffy go back to high school, but in the 90s. Personally, I think it was a little bit of an experiment to see how well it did before Boom Studios took it up. But I actually really enjoyed this. It had this whole nostalgia thing, which I really enjoyed, so that was awesome. So I've also did a review this year of Slayer, which was set in the Buffyverse. And it was set after the series ended. So if you don't know, the series ended with lots and lots of Slayers, and this takes a look at the story of one of those Slayers. I'll leave a link to the review here, but I did not get on with this. So that put a little bit of pressure on Boom Studios to get this right. When I was reading this, well, before I read this, I had it in my mind that what I didn't want this to be. What I didn't want this graphic novel to be was a reboot for the next generation, but didn't capture what we loved about Buffy the Vampire Slayer to begin with. As a hardcore fan, this is what I was looking for. I was looking for the thing, the spark that made me fall in love with Buffy the Vampire Slayer to begin with. Did it have it? No. In honesty, no. Does it have the potential to get there? Yes, absolutely. But there are a few things that Boom Studios needs to do in order to capture the hardcore Buffy fan base if they want me specifically to continue reading. So I want to give away as few spoilers as possible, but I think it's important that we look at the decisions Boom Studios made about the differences from the original Buffy to this reboot, because these, in my opinion, play a vital part as to whether I'm going to enjoy it or not. So as I've said, the first one is that it's set in 2019. That's absolutely fine by me. I've got no problem with that at all. Largely all it means is the Scooby Gang tend to send text messages. The second one is Willow starts off as being gay and she doesn't seem to be very geeky. So I'll just leave that hanging there for the moment. The next one is Spike and Drusilla are in the first volume. Anyone who's watched the TV show knows that they didn't appear until season 2. So they're already in this, and it seems that Drusilla is the main villain out of the duo, which in the TV series Spike was kind of the main villain and used to take care of Drusilla because she was weaker. Now prepare yourselves, this is probably going to be such a bombshell for some of you if you haven't read it already, so you might want to just do this until I've finished. But Cordelia is nice. Just going to leave you hanging with that for a second, just going to let that sink in. Now, a few things that are the same. Xander still has a crush on Buffy, important in this first volume. Sunnydale, I think, is still on the Hellmouth, although they didn't outwardly say it's on a Hellmouth. Everybody was kind of like, stuff happens in Sunnydale, so I assume it's on the Hellmouth, although no one said it's on a Hellmouth. Buffy just wants to be normal. The first 2, possibly 3 seasons of the TV series saw Buffy just trying to deal with being a Slayer, and really all she wanted to do was just be a normal teenager. So this kind of replicates that a little bit. The Buffy, Willow, Xander and Giles dynamic is still there. At least they want it to still be there. They become friends and they kind of form the essence of the Scooby Gang. And obviously, essentially, Buffy and her mum moved from LA because Buffy was getting into trouble. So one of the things that I personally really enjoyed about Buffy the Vampire Slayer was how it managed to develop its characters over the course of the seasons. Let's take Willow for example. She started off not very confident. She was a bit of a nerd, well, a self-confessed nerd, and we saw her progress in terms of building her confidence, finding out who she was on the inside, in that she was gay, and really coming into her own. She was a fully rounded character. What we've got here is we start off with a Willow that is more like how Willow ended than how she began. So my question is, how are you going to develop this character, Boom? Another thing that I kind of picked up from this first volume was that they didn't really introduce any of the characters. It's like usually when you introduce a character, you will let the reader know a bit about their personality so that they can get themselves familiarised with who this character is. It was almost like Boom automatically assumed everybody would know who these characters were, so they were using that as a jumping off point to introduce the characters rather than developing any sense of character base themselves. I didn't enjoy that because for me, I wanted to really go back to the beginning and introduce these characters. I also felt like it was a little bit lazy on their part. This was the same with the friendship between Buffy, Willow and Xander. It's like they met and then automatically they were friends. There was no development, there was no story. It's just we met, and because we met, we're friends now. And suddenly they're the best of friends forever, and there was absolutely no development there. It didn't make sense to me. It's like they were best friends without actually investing any time together. They had like one scene together when they were watching TV, and then that was it. And then all of a sudden they were best friends. And then they were helping Buffy slay vampires, and they were wielding flaming swords together like they've had a lifetime of martial arts training. It didn't make sense. There was no development. There's no starting point. It's like page 1, they meet, they're the Scooby Gang, they're fighting demons, and they're really great at it. Who wants to read that? I felt robbed of quality Buffy, Willow, Xander time. For me, that's where Buffy really shined, was in that friendship. They didn't develop it. They need to do that. Another thing, for me, Spike was at his best when he was his worst. He seems tame at the moment. I don't know where they're going to take this character because quite clearly they just want us to like him, and I'm not about liking characters. I'm about investing myself in interesting characters. That's what Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series got. Has Boom Studios got this? I don't know. So to summarise, it feels as though the painstaking character arcs that the characters went through in the TV show in order to be a well-rounded or character at the end point of these arcs, Boom Studios decided that that's what they're going to be without putting any of the work in. I didn't like that. I will say, however, that this wasn't the case for Buffy. She is quite obviously trying to get to grips with being the Slayer, and all she wants to do is be a normal girl. But saying that, other than her constant moaning about how she just wants to be normal, there wasn't much personality behind this character, which really surprised me. It's almost like Boom Studios wanted to introduce so many recognisable characters all in one volume, they actually failed to pay attention to the protagonist of the story. Major fail, Boom. With the shittiness that was the Slayer book released earlier this year, I really needed this graphic novel to be amazing. But Boom Studios really need to up their game if they're going to please superfans like me. So here is what Boom Studios needs to do now in order to make this graphic novel series a success. So I'm hoping that they're watching this. Firstly, stop going for shock value when it's detrimental to characters. Change Cordelia back now. You can do it. Give her a head injury or something and make her a bitch again. Just do it. Do it. Work on more and authentic Buffyisms in the dialogue. Employ the writers from the TV series and from the previous graphic novels. Take time to develop the relationships and the characters that we love. Don't assume we'll fall in love with them again when you put half the effort in, because we won't. Make Willow a nerd again. That's it. I mean, even when she was practicing witchcraft and she was gay and everything like that and her character developed, there was still the essence of Willow, there was still her nerdiness. When I was reading this graphic novel, all I saw was a hipster. But most importantly, slow down the pacing in order to take the time to develop your story. Go for the long game, not the short-term explosions. You have us hardcore fans already. You don't need to dazzle us with shiny action, you need to satisfy us with story development. So in the end, I gave the reboot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Volume 1, High School is Hell, 3 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it. Hey, it's Buffy, I'm going to enjoy it, but Boom Studios needs to realise that it needs to elevate its game if it's going to receive the loyalty that the TV series did. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Until next time guys, happy reading.